Russia is intensifying its offense in eastern Ukraine today. Troops are moving on the ground and missiles are being fired into cities that Moscow says officially belong to Russia. This is putting even more pressure on NATO and the United Nations to take action. I had the honor of sitting down with the woman who represents the United States on the world stage at the United Nations, Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield. She has been outspoken about what Putin is doing in Russia and Ukraine. So I started out by asking her about the support Ukraine is getting from other countries. Take a listen. There seems to be some cracks in the Western support for Ukraine, particularly as it relates to supplying military weapons. I'm wondering, is it getting harder to rally our allies around continued support for this country?
I don't think that's the case. I think our allies are steadfast in their support for Ukraine. They know that if we don't support Ukraine, their own sovereignty and democracy and their values will be on the chopping block with the Russians. So I think we're standing strong. We're continuing to pressure the Russians. We're isolating them here in New York. At the United Nations, we have condemned them. 141 countries voted to condemn the Russian action, and that commitment remains strong. We have to continue to make sure that we as partners are communicating with each other, but there are no cracks in that commitment to ensure that Russia is held accountable for this unconscionable attack on the sovereignty of Ukraine.
In March, I remember very vividly President Biden, he gave a speech. And in that speech, he ad-libbed a little bit, and where he said that Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, quote, cannot remain in power. Now, some of my former colleagues at the White House immediately after that walked that back. I think the president was being honest. How can we continue to treat Vladimir Putin as a legitimate world leader after what he has done and continues to do in Ukraine?
Well, certainly Russia's legitimacy on the world stage has been compromised by President Putin. They, as I noted earlier, they are isolated in the Security Council, and they are isolated around the world. They have been condemned around the world. So they're on their back foot right now to try to explain what they're doing on the world stage. So there are questions about the legitimacy of Russia at this point. We have to deal with them as a permanent member of the Security Council, but we don't have to allow them to direct how we act as a council.
Let's talk about Russia. On April 6th, Ukrainian President Zelensky, he addressed the United Nations Security Council. And he said in that address, quote, you need to act immediately, speaking to the Security Council. And he basically called attention to the fact that Russia is a sitting member of the council. And because they are a sitting member, they are, that gives them license, if you will, to reject something that they don't agree with. It's a veto, but for the folks at home, we're talking about rejecting what they don't agree with. President Zelensky was basically asking the council to consider reform. And I'm wondering if he has a point.
He absolutely does have a point. We have discussed UN reform for years. We support discussions about UN reform. We support efforts to look at how we can reform the Security Council. It is something that is extraordinarily difficult, but it's something that we all see the need for. And I, again, understand the frustration that the Ukrainian president expressed in that meeting.
Okay. Well, NBC News recently reported that Ukraine's race to plant new crops while also shipping its vast contribution of global food supplies around the world is currently in jeopardy and danger due to this war. I know that food security is something that's not just important to the United Nations, but it's important to you personally. What is the UN doing to address this food shortage?
The United Nations has been extraordinarily proactive on this issue. The Secretary General has been engaged in talks with the Ukrainians and the Russians and the Turks on how we can break the blockage of food and grain that's coming out of Ukraine as well as out of Russia. Ukraine has 25 million tons of grain sitting, waiting to be shipped out. So the UN has proactively engaged in an effort to unblock this. We support that effort.